Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are the hardcore conference goers. We appreciate you being here for our presentation this afternoon. And as Mo said, that this presentation is, it takes a village to create and sustain a career pathway. And my name is Deborah Hsu. I'm the Associate Director for Career Technical Education at Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. And I'm going to be introducing this panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to them because they've done this presentation before and they know what they're doing in more ways than one. But I want to just share a little bit with you about this project and tell you how it came to be. 2 years ago, Minnesota State Colleges and Universities was awarded a technical assistance project. We wouldn't really call it a grant because there wasn't money attached to it, but it was a technical assistance project from the U.S. Department of Education, and it was called Advancing Career Technical Education in Career Pathways. And the purpose of this endeavor was so that we could really take a look at all of the organizations, agencies, education agency, workforce agencies, DEED, Department of Human Services, all of which have career pathway efforts underway. And what we wanted to do was come together with all of these groups. And I think there we list all of the groups that have joined us in this endeavor. And we're looking at trying to come up with a common definition of a career pathway, find out what we're all doing, talk to each other, and maybe realize some common goals and common activities that we can engage in together. And one of the things that we were looking to do was create a model for creating a career pathway. And the Rochester community came forward and said that they were willing to partner. They were willing to be the partner with us, the local partner with us, and as they were developing their career pathway in the health programs. What we're going to be doing is creating a communications plan that involves all of those organizations that you saw about career pathways in Minnesota and about a model for creating a career pathway in a community. And what you'll see here is that in Rochester, they have embraced what the Department of Labor introduced to us, which are 6 elements that are required to create and sustain a career pathway. And those 6 elements have been crosswalked by the U.S. Department of Education and Jobs for the Future with rigorous programs of study. So what you're seeing here is sort of a marriage between the Department of Labor and the Department of Education and the coming together with the 6 elements and the 10 rigorous programs of study. In your folder, there is a crosswalk document, I believe. If there's not, you can come to me and I'll get it to you. But these are the 6 elements. And what's going to happen now is that I'm going to turn it over to Mo Amundsen, and she's going to describe to you, along with the rest of the folks on the panel, how they have created their career pathway. And our goal is to have a toolkit that we can disseminate across the whole state to help other communities develop career pathways by incorporating all of their partners that are stakeholders in workforce development in their community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mo.
I'm Mo Amundsen. I am the Perkins Coordinator for Rochester Community and Technical College. And I'm a member of the Governor's Workforce Development Council as well. So I've had a real interest in career pathways because that's one of the recommendations that we've been working on for the Governor's Workforce Development Council. And I'll just do a little plug for that quickly. We met here this morning and we have just put out our recommendations for the governor and the legislature, and you can get them on the website. You'll be able to get this booklet. It's gwdc.org. gwdc.org. and it's called Building Partnerships to Overcome Barriers, Developing Skills to Thrive in a Changing Economy. So if you're interested in that, I intended to have some here, but the printer didn't print them very well, so we kind of have to have them reprinted. This worked out perfectly for us in Rochester because we had been working on a pathway for a very long time. We've had a health science program in our high schools for 40 years. And it was a certified nursing assistant program. So what happened was Mayo Clinic came to us and said, we're going to tell you what you need to do get us employees. They came to us and said, what can we do to help you so that we can get more employees? And that's kind of how our this whole system started. But these are the 6 elements of a career pathway. These are not our things that we decided on. These are things from the Department of Labor. They put this together. I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnerships. We have a committee called the CARE Committee in Rochester. It started in 2002, and it was a conversation between the vice president of Rochester Community and Technical College and the director of curriculum and instruction in the Rochester Public Schools that has morphed into now 12 years, a new building that's going to be going up, and a collaborative partnership for all that length of time. So we have a very robust committee. Our partnership has a split of monies that we recovered from the Department of Education when we do PSEO. And if you want to talk to me about that, I'll leave some cards here and you can email me your questions. But just for brevity, the money that we have recovered from the Department of Education is split 35% to the college, 35% to the school district, and 30% goes into a pot for the CARE Committee. And we have paid for scholarships for students to get their CNA. We have a Bridges program in the summer. So we've done a lot of different collaborative things through our CARE Committee, and it just has expanded our partnerships with other areas. Workforce 2020's initiative with the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, who is usually here. However, the person who is our presenter just had a baby, and so we let her off the hook so she could stay home and take care of her brand new baby. But Workforce 2020 has an initiative to provide apprenticeships and internships for students. And CTEC, and I'm going to let Janie talk about CTEC. We also had Mayo come forward and say, you know, we could do an apprenticeship. And we've had this apprenticeship intact for about 8 years. It's an actual Department of Labor approved apprenticeship. It's 800 hours. The student, when they complete that apprenticeship, it's done during the summer of their junior year, or in between their junior and senior year, and then all during their senior year, and they do 800 hours during that time. It's a paid apprenticeship. They are Mayo employees, and they have had to have completed the health science curriculum to be considered. I'm going to pass this off to Randy, and I should have introduced everybody, but I'll let you introduce yourselves since you all know your own names.
I think Randy Johnson, Director of Workforce Development Incorporated, is what we call ourselves in Southeast Minnesota. It's a workforce investment board. You've got workforce investment boards everywhere in the country, and there are 16 of them in Minnesota. So it's not hard to find them, to locate their interest. They help oversee some of the delivery of services for the various partners at workforce centers. So there's a workforce center. There's 50 of them in the state of Minnesota, so I'm sure you can locate those. We have a rich history throughout the years. I've been doing this it's going to be the 30th year. It doesn't matter whether it's recession or it's an overheated economy, whatever. There's always some new initiative that's necessary because the economy just keeps changing. The demand on the workforce is, and we keep running into the same partners at doing this kind of work. And I'd have to say that this has gotten easier and should be easier for anybody trying to replicate these things going forward, because I'm seeing a lot of evidence now of what's known as a collective impact approach to our work. the idea of isolated silos is really discouraged. And I know there's been lip service to that in the past, but I'm seeing some real evidence of that now from the federal government right on through the state. So it was time that we came together, and rather than work on project by project, we started the concept of maybe we ought to just identify our partnership here and come up with a memorandum of understanding. I'll talk about that a little bit later as we get into the details of it, but that's been our history.
So I'm Janie Gibson. I'm with Rochester Public Schools, and I represent the K-12 piece of this. So what does this partnership look like on a day-to-day basis? What it looks like for our learners and for our students of Rochester Public Schools and southeastern Minnesota is they have an opportunity to attend what's called the Health Sciences Career Center. It's not their main high school. They leave their comprehensive high school for about a 2-period block to come out and get experiences in one of the health sciences career pathways. So they have the opportunity to leave at the end of their time there with a CNA certification, with pharmacy tech, with just some general basic knowledge about what the various health career pathways may be. And so why this is created, or what is unique about this opportunity, is it's a true partnership with the Mayo Clinic. It's a true partnership with some healthcare facilities, nursing homes, and pharmacies in our community. And so not only do the students learn through textbooks and through materials, but they actually have the opportunity to experience it firsthand and actually work with patients and do some of those types of things. And that wouldn't be possible if we tried it in isolation. So that's where the partnership comes into play on a day-to-day basis for K-12. It is also replicated to a certain degree with adult basic ed, and I'm going to let Julie talk about that.
Hi, I'm Julie Niggin, and I'm the Rochester Public Schools Program Manager for Adult Basic Education and Adult and Family Literacy. And we were sort of kind of the last ones to join the partnership, so we got to watch everybody else make all the mistakes. It was really great. Helped us out a lot, like that when that happens. But the best part about being in adult basic education in Rochester and being part of this partnership is, I try to explain to people, Rochester is in a good position. It's a large enough city to have a full array of services for people, educational services, human services, recreation, etc., and employment services. But it's small enough that you know the person in charge of it on a first-name basis. And so you're very accountable. And when you want to work together with somebody, you pick up the phone and you do it. And it's easy to build partnerships, and you can't run away from them. So we're very fortunate with that. We joined sort of a little bit on the outside, working with RCTC, just Rochester Community and Technical College, just a little bit on the side, doing a couple little projects together, mainly not in the academic area of RCTC. But that let us form a partnership already with individuals and administrators from RCTC, and to start seeing how we could start blending our programming and help us work together for the good of students. And that partnership with RCTC and all of these other partners has grown and added Mayo and quite a few others. So it's been a great thing.
And I want to talk about the chamber. It's unusual that a chamber is that embedded in education. However, our chamber has a workforce and education director, and that's the person who is not here. They're very interested in what's going to happen with the workforce in Rochester. They want to be involved, and they stepped up to the plate and formed this Workforce 2020 committee. And it took us about 6 years to morph this into what we really want to do. And that is to take the CTEC kids, which Janie's going to talk about shortly, and give them an opportunity in the workforce. I also want to apologize. Mayo would have been here with us, but the person who was presenting had a death in his family last night, and so he's off the hook, obviously. But our chamber is very embedded with Mayo, and Mayo is very embedded with our chamber, and they're both interested in their workforce. I know that if John was here and could talk about Mayo, they have hired 121 people who have gone through the health science career programs so far. That's how many he can identify right now that Mayo built their own workforce. which is wonderful. And that's what they wanted to do. That's why this all started out as a great partnership. I'm going to turn it back over to Randy, and he can talk about the LMI.
Yes. Before we leave the partnership, just one thing. If you're saying what makes this thing different, we'll get to it later. But we're, I think, unique in Rochester in the way we've positioned ourselves physically. That our workforce center is actually located on the campus, a brand new building built through funds from the legislature here and just opened in August at the Rochester Community and Technical College. And their programs for workforce development and customized training and small business development center are all connected right there. And shortly, next year or so, will be CTEC on campus as well. So just want to put that as a placeholder. We're asked to make use of data all the time, right? And there's tons of data out there. It seems to be a game of who can grab the latest data or the neatest collection or get the newest twist on some data, and off we go in a different direction. Something we came about with our discussion early on is that that's really not being fair to the people or to our community if we're all taking a disparate view of something and not connecting. And so one project that was put forward here by the state as a pilot, it came through support from the Minsky institutions and supported by the Governor's Workforce Development Council, was to look at two new tools that we could use, actually not so new, but they're new to us. Wanted Analytics, which gives you real-time job openings in a way that can be manipulated and printed out in ways that makes a lot clearer sense than some of the other data that we've seen. And EMSI, which is Economic Modeling Specialists Incorporated, that will allow you to take a look at your community and zero in on what's making your economy sing, what's unique to your economy versus others, get into location quotients and a lot of other kind of data, and you can help make decisions of what's happening in your area. I want to, when I'm talking about data, also though say your workforce investment boards all have the requirement to have targeted jobs and targeted job strategies. So a lot of this work has already been done. You'll have a board that's made up primarily of private industry representatives. So for others to continue to replow that ground and come up with a new view and new pathways of study based on their viewpoint seems kind of redundant. We got a lot of work to do to keep going back to reinventing some of the simplest stuff, which is plowing through data would be kind of a waste of time. So get a hold of those folks and make sure you know what the data is. Beyond the data, it's not, again, grabbing numbers and then putting your own spin on it. It is what does the numbers tell you. Just this morning, I was giving a presentation with our labor market information to the Greater Leadership Greater Rochester, a program sponsored out of the chamber. I think we all know by now that we've heard that the recession's over. We've regained the number of jobs that we've had before. I think you also know that many of those jobs aren't the same jobs. They're part-time, temporary kind of things. But did we dig any deeper than that? And so today I was showing them a couple other different cuts at the demographics. Interesting part is that who got the jobs back? Not only what kind of jobs. And we found that 55 and older people got 20 and 25% increase in employment from what they were 4 years ago. Whereas those young folks, 19, 21-year-olds, actually lost about 2% in terms of total employment. And it's true for all of them all the way up till about 55. There's a story there. That data tells you that business is saying, I would rather have somebody who knows what they're doing, even pay them slightly more, perhaps negotiate a little lower number of hours per week to have those folks take over and lay off the younger ones. Well, here's the deal. The older ones are going to retire, and they're starting to retire in mass. I'll bleed into Mayo here because they're not here to defend themselves. Mayo, come January 1st, has changed their retirement package for their folks, and I've been working with the Mayo people trying to get a handle on what that is going to amount to. The total number possible that could actually happen, but won't, is 8,000 to 10,000 people retiring overnight this January 1st. That's how many are eligible. We're very doubtful, and as they are, that kind of number would happen because There's a lot of 50-year-olds that are eligible that are likely not. But it could be anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000. And that's a pretty scary thought. How would they get by doing that? Where would those people come from? So there's a real story in that kind of thing. And going back to that other part of how they employed older folks, as they retire, they are now turning to look at the young people to have to step up to be leaders. So even retail, whatever, within 3 months of getting hired, you're probably going to be asked to be a night manager somewhere. And they're absolutely aghast at the kind of leadership skills or the vacuum that's there. And so I can validate that by talking to our folks then at RCTC and saying, yeah, that's our customized training demands in the last year. The phone's been melting, ringing off the hook saying, give me some leadership training because I don't know what to do with these folks that don't have those skills. So this idea of soft skills, and we've heard it before, and yada, 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 you got to put it together with data because it's changing and it's actually getting worse. And we got to do something about it. Anyway, I can go.
All right, and Mayo's not alone. We hear constantly from our construction folks and our plumbers and et cetera, like I'm sure you do, about how concerned they are about the future. In Rochester, we're very fortunate that they didn't just talk about the problem or admire the problem, they took action on the problem. In 2012, I believe, they approved 0.5% of the sales tax would go into a special pot specifically for education, and that would develop what we are calling the CTEC, the Career and Technical Education Center at Hines. Hines is the name of the building out on the RCTC campus that we will be located right near the Workforce Development Center. And so what is what is CTEC and what are we going to do with it? We have seen some great success, as you've heard about, with the health sciences career pathway. What if we can replicate that? And better yet, what if we can replicate that in the field that our community is saying we need employees, we need these skills, we need these types of people? So we have identified, with the help of our community, 7 career pathways that we will be offering and developing over the course of time. Educators did not develop these in isolation. Educators developed these with the community members sitting around the table, as well as RCTC. So when I say educators, it's not just Rochester Public Schools, it's the community college in the area as well. And we've looked at opportunities for articulated credit, for concurrent enrollment credit, for certifications. These will be opportunities for learners to either obtain workable skills so they can leave us and go directly to work, or to obtain skills that will give them the edge if they want to continue the education in that area. And so you can see we have health sciences, we have ag, hospitality, construction, manufacturing, engineering, and IT. And again, those pathways have been developed by our community, and so it's not something we've done in isolation. We will use a phased-in approach as far as opening it. Health sciences is up and running right now. Starting this fall, actually in the Hines Center, so in the Minskew facility itself, we will run our residential construction program, our engineering program, and our ag program. Our ag will be unique because it will offer the CASE certification. And then the following year, when the actual new facility, the building that's going to be called CTEC, is up and running, that's when we'll be able to open up the additional pathways. So very exciting stuff, not only for the students in the southeastern Minnesota area, but the employers and the workforce development folks in southeastern Minnesota as well. But again, it wasn't done in isolation. It was absolutely done as a partnership.
Well, where does adult basic education, where does the adult learner fit into all of this? This I represent and support, and am honored to work with hundreds and hundreds of adult learners in Rochester. We see about 2,500 students a year, graduating anywhere between 200 and 300 students with high school diplomas or GEDs. We used to think, I used to pat myself on the back at graduation every year thinking, darn good work this year, Julie. And our students would go out the door and I'd think my job was done. And if there's anything I've learned in the last 5 years, it's that my job was not done. I was not doing a good enough job. Yes, they were getting their high school diplomas and GEDs, but were they prepared for college and careers? Were they ready to go into Rochester's highly skilled workforce and get a job that was going to lead to additional education, to move up the salary scale, and to become a leader in their workplace? We weren't doing that. And because we're open enrollment, you can never age out of us and you never have to pay. They can always come back to us. So it was my job, it became our job to prepare our students for the next step. That yes, you know, congratulations on that high school diploma or GED, but now the work really begins. And so we began working with RCTC, as I mentioned earlier. We also began working with the HR department at Mayo. And the reason that they were interested in us was that they wanted to diversify their workforce. They wanted a reliable, locally grown workforce that reflected the community. And in some areas that was happening. In many, many areas it was not. And so, again, between partnerships with RCTC and Workforce Development and Mayo, we formed a pathway for adult learners to become trained, educated, employed, supported, and to succeed in jobs they never dreamed of before. And so we're really excited about that. We did everything from a couple of us actually shadowed Mayo employees for days, taking notes on what they were doing, interviewing them about what kinds of training they had, what they wished they had if they had more training, what the demands were, what was the best part of your job, what's the worst part of your job, what's your schedule. And then we worked with our staff, with Mayo, with RCTC, and developed a curriculum. RCTC received one of the Bridges to Healthcare grants and very graciously wrote us in for a very large chunk of change. Nobody ever does that for us. So it was pretty exciting. It was the first time that had ever happened. And said, okay, you go with it. And at the same time, we had worked very closely with RCTC looking at those lower level classes, those developmental ed classes, especially the lowest level ones, saying, you know what, our students don't have time or money for those. They can't take the time. They're parents already. They need to get into the workforce. We can't be putting them into a year of dev ed, even if they need it. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we did something about it. And we have articulated classes with RCTC. The lowest level of developmental ed is now taught at Hawthorne Education Center, our main site. When our students leave Hawthorne, they take no dev ed when they enter college. They go straight into their major classes. They're leaving us and entering college. Those who go through our programming, 98% of them go on to college. And of the 98%, 87% are persisting 2 semesters or more and not in dev ed classes, in their regular classes. And we see students, anecdotally, I was discussing this morning with a group that I still see a student at RCTC who started out in a gang on the south side of Chicago. And she came to Rochester to get away from the gang. And she completed all of our programming, including getting her high school diploma, finished her work at the college, got a job at Mayo, and now she's in a track to become a nurse, an RN. So, and she's amazed herself, she's amazed us, but she's just one of hundreds of students who've done this. So Mayo has now, Bridges to Healthcare has come to an end, and Mayo has, and all of our partners have been so committed to it that they are all, including Workforce Development, United Way of Olmsted County, RCTC, at Hawthorne, and Mayo Clinic, have come together and come together with the money to keep the program going. So they're literally putting their money where their mouth is and hoping to expand it, not to contract it at the end of the grant period. So we're pretty excited about it.
This is still a work in process, obviously, and one of the things that I really want to impress upon you is this doesn't have to be anything like Rochester, Minnesota's. This can be however you design and build your own partnership. You just need to get the players together in the room, build that relationship, and then go from there. You can be in, I don't know, let's say, Glenville, Emmons, Minnesota, or you can be in St. Cloud, or you can be in Duluth, or you can be anywhere and build those kind of partnerships. You just got to bring the people together, and you can do it with any career pathway. We're trying to do that right now with a welding program with the same partners, because we have a welding program in ABE. We're going to have a manufacturing program at RC Tech High School. And we have a welding program and a CAD program, computer-aided drafting program, and a precision manufacturing program at RCTC. And workforce development tells us this is what we need bodies in. And so when you develop that kind of relationship, you can go almost anywhere and build any kind of a partnership. It doesn't need to be anything like ours, because you know your area better and you know your region better. But I would start with building relationships as number one. I talked a little bit about the Governor's Workforce Development Council, and since it's out now, you can all look and get your own information. And I'm going to have Julie talk about measure systems change and performance.
One of the difficult parts of a project like this with so many different partners is measurement and data. Because as much as we'd love to be able to just have one big old data system and everyone can put their stuff in and get their data out, it really doesn't work that way, and we all know that. So we have worked really hard to capture data in our data systems and then do the best job that we can to share that data across systems. And we're continuing to look for more ways to do this better. But, you know, I never used to be a data wonk, but I've really turned into one in the last 10 years, and I've really seen the power of data. Anecdotes are great, but you need to have, if you want to prove that it's worth $100,000 to have Hawthorne doing this project, we'd better have the data to prove it. And we'd better not only have the data from Hawthorne, but also what happens at the college. And that means people working together, people, you know, staying true to the law and the rules of their organizations, but still saying, okay, what like data can we put together in a report? And it's not rocket science, but it does make a huge difference. And you can make an argument, a very strong argument for continuing program or expanding programs with it. We have seen system changes. I don't think there's any doubt about it, because our data has proven that we are worth the money, our partnership is worth the money, and so people are not doing business the way they did before. They're not in isolation. They're certainly not in silos. It's pretty exciting to see people. I get to the point now where if I can't be at a meeting, I know somebody's there who's going to advocate for the adult learners I serve. I don't have to worry that they're going to be forgotten, because everyone, and it just as nobody's here from RCTC, I'm going to advocate for RCTC. Same thing for Mayo Clinic and their contribution to this and their forward-thinking attitude.
These are the people that we pulled together. We pulled together Workforce Center, the education, and obviously the employers. And that's where this memorandum of understanding started. And I'm going to have Randy just kind of fill you in about the memorandum of understanding, because it came from a grant that we did not get, but this developed out of it, so it turned out perfect.
Yeah, there was a grant back a year ago or so, federal grant for connectors to connect students to employment. And so we had some really rich meetings, and I thought we made some progress. I thought we had a pretty good proposal, but never throw anything away. What we had to come up with is, when you're sitting down with disparate groups, or they seem to be, start figuring out the commonalities, and then figure out how to get out of each other's way and to complement what they're doing and make that work. And so we came up with just a Venn diagram here. Again, education, career planning, and employers. And we had everything from the chamber again to all of our different groups here saying, all right, let's look at this and let's draw the circles as though they overlap, and then let's look at where they overlap and what's in that cell. What does each of us do that kind of fits in there? How do we make sure that we're doing something that's not duplicative to the others, or at least is complementary to the others? Or is there a cell that you really don't belong in and doesn't work for you? So you have a pretty good conversation around that. I think that's where that started. That was the basis for us to start working on a memorandum of understanding. So we isolated these different partners, and then instead of just taking the generic topic of education, career planning, and employer engagement, looked at the different players and saw where their cells overlapped and kept looking at that and identifying what those needs are. And it was a, wasn't an intimidating meeting. It was very, very helpful for us to, identify what exactly we're doing. And we found things where there's a cell here that we didn't have anything going in. None of us was in. So let's take a look at that and how we can make that work. Before you knew it, we started identifying what those commonalities were, and we kind of went back to some of that information that we had gotten from that OVE project that we were working on, and said, again, let's start constructing some of the things that we can do to complement each other. So starting with data, again, we've already talked about how there's many ways of looking at data. Have that conversation in the same room. Don't say, I can click on that, and I've got that tool, and I'll take it from here. Have it in the same room so you get the same story out of the data. The other thing that Julie touched on is when you connect data, not only for terms of outcomes but cost, it's a very powerful commentary you can have and discussion with private business. You'll get into the area of return on investment is really what you're doing. And that can be calculated. We've come up with a formula long ago that was fairly simple. IBM helped us 20-some years ago. But it's just as simple as if you're looking at the number of, or the amount of taxes somebody's paying, if you can add that up, and we all collect data. Once a person gets a job, and there's a real number to that. If they were on any kind of public assistance, did they get off that public assistance as a result of your help? And that's welfare avoided. And those kinds of costs avoided or taxes added, and then divide by the total cost of the operation. And when you take that, it typically looks, if you extrapolate it over a year's period of time, we run into numbers like 400, 500, 600%. In other words, like $6 back for every dollar invested in a year's time. And you give that in front of a Mayo Clinic or some of these other places, they say, hey, I can take this to the board. They understand this. This pays. I mean, all the verbiage, you can talk forever, and it goes in one ear and out the other. When you reduce it down to this is paying, it makes a difference. So get your data together, and that was part of our memorandum. Next piece was to look at, again, this concept of career connectors. There needs to be any kind of a proposal you put together where there's going to be education developed here in a curriculum, and you somehow want to identify employers and make them a part of the solution. You can have the greatest curriculum, you can have very willing employers, but who's going to make the connection between the two? And that's often overlooked, and it's one of the reasons why some of these schemes don't go very far. Apprenticeships never quite get off the ground, not because they were poorly constructed. It's just that who's going to do the shoe leather, I'd call it, to go between that employer on behalf of an individual. So identify that. Who's doing that in each project? The other thing is then form this coalition of employers. And we all have employers and advisory boards, and we all know a lot of people, and they know us individually. But you got to start actually quantifying who's going to do what, and start developing a list of, here are the list of the places that will sponsor internships or job shadowing and whatever those other engagements are, willing to come in and speak to class. And I think we all have those little crib sheets. Put them together, and you're building a nuclear pile of information about connection to employers. That's really important. Next thing is then staff assistance to co-facilitate advisory board meetings. I was a work experience coordinator certified many years ago and had to go out and look at the different programs, and the common thing that I saw was that certainly in the case of K-12 but also higher ed, everyone, if you touch vocational, you have to have an advisory board. It's in statute. Dirty secret is a lot of them don't exist, only on paper, or if they meet, it's once or twice a year for lunch. And one of the reasons, well, why not? Why don't they go deeper? And there's some very rich programs. Well, it takes time. It takes effort. It takes staffing. And, well, there's all of us. Can we help with that process? If it's outreach or just keeping minutes or any of those things, let's throw in on this together and make that happen. It really doesn't cost a lot. The fifth thing here is resources for curriculum and articulation, aligning this with state standards. You know, resources in terms of materials, sometimes even financial assistance, but it's as important as any is put it on the work plans. Now, we get together as kind of middle management folks and agree on things, but if it's not really in the work plan of somebody to make that happen, it still might not get done. So you have to make sure that you follow up, and as I just did with my board, here are the topics on youth for one of our committees and what we're going to do, and it's laid out in their plan of how are we tracking our alignment with employers and with other state standards, and reach out deliberately, as I did the other day with a group of educators there. I know that there's world's best workforce legislation out there for K-12. I get concerned it's kind of viewed as in the infancy stage here as another mandate or requirement. It's a reporting thing. There's a lot more to that, and it'll go as far as you want to make it, but you're going to need some extra help to make that work because there's only so many hours a day in the day. Professional development. We all have professional development. Make sure you invite your other partners. Don't do it in a silo. Why not? 7, increase the number of high school teachers or vocationally licensed. That's something that we're concerned about. If all this is going to happen, we need more teachers that are trained as work experience coordinators and vocationally licensed folks. And finally, then put extra emphasis on these kinds of written agreements like internships and registered apprenticeships and work together collaboratively, because it really does take everybody to make that happen.
Well, I don't want to go over our time, and it's according to my watch, it's 4 o'clock. So I want to thank you guys for being here. It's so late in the day, and if you have any questions or you need any information, I'm going to leave some cards here, and you can grab those or get in touch with me and call me on my cell phone, and because I'm never in my office, obviously. So thank you very much for your attention, and Deborah, thank you for allowing us to do this.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you very much.